Friends, welcome to my notes. Today, we will try to understand what war is. War is a complex and profound phenomenon which shapes our society ranging from personal to global aspects. Understanding war helps us better understand the challenges of modern world, influences our choices of personal and societal life, provides us insight into human history and nature. Conflict between two or more groups is what we call war. War can be among nations, political groups, religious groups, and many others. War may involve arms and weapons, cyber intelligence, robotics, political sanctions, or combination of them. If we look over the course of human history, we can see that war often arises from disputes over resources, territory, power, ideology, or security. Aftermath of any great war always shaped either political borders or economic system or cultural identities. But it always shaped involved cultures emotionally. In early human civilization, that is, during prehistoric and ancient age, warfare was primarily small-scale and tribal. It was generally hand-to-hand war and might involve primitive weapons like stones, sticks, clubs, spears, etc. Over time, as societies grew from smaller tribes to greater nations, as the societies grew, warfare grew with it and became more complex. The use of organized professional soldiers became more common with the rise of Roman Empire. War started to become more tactical and disciplined. In medieval age, feudal armies started to dominate the battlefields. Knights in armor, castles, and the rise of cavalry became defining characteristics of medieval warfare. Societies started to use castles and fortifications. Siege warfare became a major aspect of conflict. Techniques like trebuchet and battering rams were employed to breach strongholds. Over time, longer-ranged and more effective weapons became a necessity. In 14th century, gunpowder became introduced and revolutionized warfare. Cannons and firearms became common in battles. Gunpowder-powered weapons led to downfall of medieval knight and the rise of gunpowder-based artillery and firearms. Advancement of firearms and increasing use of firearms made warfare more sophisticated. Tactical strategies started to advance rapidly. Armies began to rely more on firearms, pike formations, and artillery to achieve battlefield dominance. Nations started to form standing professional armies for both protection and aggression. During this time, warfare started to become global, and naval warfare started to take significant importance, especially for European powers to expand their control around the globe. The Industrial Revolution dramatically changed warfare through mass production of weapons. This mass production also helped expansion of warfare with larger and mechanized armies. First and Second World War are two recent widespread wars in this era. These two wars brought rapid technical evolution along with them, including chemical weapons, atomic bombs, etc. After World War II, nuclear weapons introduced possibility of total destruction. Since then, countries with nuclear weapons, known as superpowers, mostly avoided direct conflicts but got involved with proxy wars. These superpowers mostly focused on technology and information warfare and technical improvement towards their espionage attempts. With the rise of internet and digital technologies, modern warfare increasingly involves cyber warfare, intelligence operation, and disinformation campaigns. Ability to disrupt adversaries' socio-political system has taken central role in warfare in this era. In recent times, use of robotics and artificial intelligences has also started to become widespread. As use of robotics reduces human casualties, at least the side who uses. War has always evolved to adapt recent improvements from science and technology and also contributed to. War has evolved from small scale person to person to larger global scale throughout human civilization. Conflict or warfare is as old as humanity itself. From the cavemen who fought for food to the political ideologies that sparked world wars, the reasons humans engage in conflict are both varied and deeply ingrained. In prehistoric times, life was a constant struggle for survival. Early humans were hunters and gatherers, dependent on the land for food and shelter. Humans fought to protect their territory from rivals. These were not about ideology or glory, they were about basic survival. Territorial disputes were likely the first spark of conflict. Early humans had to protect their hunting grounds from other groups. The fight for water, food, and shelter was just as fierce. Because in the early days, losing a battle over resources meant the difference between life and death. Fast forward to around when the agricultural revolution happened. Humans began to settle, grow crops, and build permanent homes. War no longer was just about hunting grounds. Then people fought over land, wealth, and the newly emerging concept of property. This is when kingdoms and city-states arose and needed protection. The very notion of ownership became a powerful driver of conflict. By the time we reached the era of Greeks, Romans, and Persians, war had taken on new dimensions. It wasn't just about survival anymore. Empire building, that is political power over others, became the driving force behind many conflicts. They fought to expand their territories, conquer new peoples, and control trade routes. The Middle Ages brought new dimensions to the idea of war. As kingdoms solidified their power, religion became one of the strongest driving forces for conflict, namely holy wars. The modern world ushered in a new era of warfare, one driven by increasingly complex ideologies and rise of nationalism. As the nation-state became the dominant political unit, people fought not just to expand their territory or wealth, but to assert the sovereignty and identity of their nations. In large part, World War I and World War II were a result of competing national ambitions, economic rivalries, and military alliances. The aftermath of World War II set the stage for the Cold War and proxy wars, conflict not between countries but between ideologies. In the modern world, the reason for war are often a complex mix of economic interests, ideological differences, and the fight for power. We live in a world where the motivations for war have shifted. As nations seek for global power and as non-state actors engage in unconventional forms of conflict, the lines between reasons for war have blurred. But one thing remains clear, that the drive to fight is as much about identity, resources, and power as it ever was. Violence is often the driving force of war. War by its very nature, involves the use of force, weapons, and combat between opposing groups. This violence devastates the immediate region and battlefield and alters the social, cultural, economic, and political fabric of human societies. The most obvious consequence of war-related violence is the physical destruction it causes, including the loss of life, injuries, and destruction of infrastructure. War results in mass casualties both among combatants and civilians. According to the International Committee of Red Cross and other humanitarian organizations, for every soldier killed in battle, several civilians often suffer indirect consequences such as starvation, disease, and displacement. Combatants, civilians, and children exposed to violence often experience long-term psychological damage. The United Nations High Commissioner of Refugees estimates that millions of displaced persons suffer from mental health conditions related to conflict exposure. Violence during war severely disrupts social lives. Communities are torn apart, traditions and cultural heritage is destroyed, sometimes beyond repair. With communities being torn apart, displacement of people is one of the visible effects of war. According to the UNHCR, in 2023, there were over 110 million forcibly displaced people worldwide, which is a great humanitarian crisis. Displacement also means a loss of social network and cultural ties, making it difficult for people to rebuild their lives post-conflict. The financial cost of war is astronomical. The disruption of markets, trade routes, and labor forces leads to prolonged economic stagnation. The destruction of infrastructure directly hampers economic activity. The economic burden of war disproportionately affects civilians who often lose their livelihoods and are unable to participate in the economy for years. War has been a part of human history since our earliest days. Yet, the question remains, is war ever truly justified? To understand whether war is ever justified, we need to understand why certain wars happened. The first and most important question in any war is, what's the reason for fighting? A war fought for reasons like self-defense, protecting the innocent, or stopping an aggressor are considered morally acceptable till it is bound to the reason. In contrast, wars fought for conquest, territorial expansion, or resource acquisition are typically seen as unjust. Even if the cause is just, war can still be morally questionable if the intention behind the war is not pure. The goal of the war should be to achieve peace and justice, not to seek vengeance, expand power, or enrich the aggressor. Wars should be fought only if the benefits of victory outweigh the human cost of violence. War must clearly distinguish between combatant and non-combatants. That is, civilians must be spared as much as possible during conflicts, as humanitarian cost of civilian casualties are far more affecting than anything else. While a war can be justified in paper, its consequences like loss of life, displacement of people, and long-term social and economical damage make war a deeply problematic solution. Perhaps the most obvious alternative to war is diplomacy, the art of negotiation and dialogue. Diplomacy isn't just about high-level negotiations between heads of states, it's about building trust, finding common ground, and working to understand the needs and desires of others. Another alternative to war, while a bit aggressive than diplomacy, would be economical sanctions. While sanctions can be effective in pushing a government to change its action, they often have unintended consequences, particularly on innocent civilians. They can lead to shortage of food, medical supplies, and other essential goods, which raises the ethical dilemma of whether such pressure is worth the collateral damage. Perhaps the most promising alternative to war is peace building. the long-term process of addressing the root causes of conflict before they escalate into violence. Organizations like the United Nations are working to build peace by focusing on issues like human rights, economic inequality, and governance. By focusing on justice and inclusivity, peace building aims to create a future where war isn't an option. War, in its most brutal form, strips away the life of civilization, revealing a raw, violent confrontation between humanity's darkest impulses. Yet, in the midst of its destruction, we see moments of heroism, sacrifice, and resilience, humanity's capacity to endure, to rise above the worst, and to build after the destruction. If we take a step back, perhaps we start to see the deeper meaning behind our history of conflict. War is not just a clash of weapons, it's a clash of values, ideologies, identities, and also humanity's failure to communicate, to understand others, to resolve conflict without violence. Please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this one. Like the video if you have liked it, and let me know your thoughts about the video in the comment section. I am Maruf and it has been my note. Thank you for being with me. See you in the next one.